What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Predator versus Wolverine. And as always, we will have a playlist link at the end of this video so you can get caught up. But in the last video, we basically had the Predator who had consistently faced off against Wolverine, and even more than one Predator fighting Wolverine when he had bone claws. But things are different now, because this next time that the Predator catches up to Wolverine, he's in the midst of the adamantium bonding process with Weapon X. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. So here's the thing, right? As soon as the Predator gets up to Wolverine and starts to basically examine him, he realizes that there's metal attached to his bones. And the cool thing about this, right, for those of you guys who aren't really familiar with the Predator mythos, these guys are trophy hunters, right? The ultimate hunter. The idea is that whether by way of a rite of passage or just as kind of a general enjoyment of their race overall, in multiple capacities, they travel across all of creation and they track down and hunt various creatures that they find as a test of themselves, right? Constantly improving themselves. The kicker about all this is that while Wolverine is technically unconscious, the Predator's actions wake Wolverine up, and then it immediately attacks him, right? Like Wolverine immediately attacks the Predator, and the Predator responds in the only way that it can, right? It takes the acid and pours it in Wolverine's mouth, and Wolverine is basically taken out. Because what had happened here is the Predator had looked at Wolverine and realized he was the perfect trophy, right? A being who is effectively indestructible. Now the question has to be asked, what does a Predator understand about adamantium? Because adamantium was created on Earth. It doesn't exist anywhere else in space or outside of Earth. So there's not really a way that the Predator could know outside of using its technology to examine adamantium, recognize its atomic makeup, and then realize how indestructible it is, which is probably exactly what it did, right? I mean, a being that capable, that travels all throughout space the way that it does, it probably has more than a passing knowledge of like chemistry and biochemistry and sciences and all that kind of stuff. And so with Wolverine taken out, it basically goes to its ship. Now here's a cool thing, and I'm curious to see whether or not you guys spot this. So if you look on the wall of this Predator, there is a particular skull that is here. It's up at the top, and it's a Rancor skull. In effect, Marvel Comics, like the Marvel Universe, and Star Wars share the same universe, which kind of makes sense, right? Long ago in a galaxy far, far away. So it makes perfect sense that like, because Marvel's writing Star Wars and because now you have like the regular superheroes who have always kind of been here, that they're all in the same universe, which begs the question, when are we going to see a Star Wars and Marvel superhero crossover? Only a matter of time. But I figured I'd kind of poke out, or at least point out that little Easter egg. Now, following that, right, Wolverine's healing factor being what it is, it always basically helps him to regenerate. Now, this is one of the caveats about this. It's an inconsistent aspect of Wolverine's healing factor, right? Ever since Civil War, he's just been able to effectively heal from like nothing but adamantium, right? Ever since that storyline, when he did it, it's kind of been a normal part of his character, right? Prior to that, if he was incinerated down to the skeleton, he was basically done and gone. We know that because of Days of Future Past. But one of the things to know here is that breaking into a Weapon X facility is no small thing, right? It's going to go noticed, right? Because Weapon X is a joint venture between Canada's Department H and the United States CIA. Department H, of course, being Canada's kind of like superhero research program. But like, it's a multi-government operation. It's ridiculously clandestine and super off the books. But like, people are gonna notice. And that's exactly what happens. As soon as this Predator starts to activate its ship, suddenly he's fired on by like a couple of F-16s. And then of course, it manages to take one of those F-16s out. But when the question is asked of Schwartz, right, one of the pilots, where's this thing going? She's like, it's just going up, right? It's literally going to the moon. That's when she's told to fire everything they have. But of course, as we know, these Predator ships, right, these things are shielded. They're not easily destroyed. So there's like nothing that an F-16 is gonna be able to do here. This thing just takes off, and ultimately like the F-16 has to pull back at 70,000 feet. And that's when you come across Berserker Rage Wolverine. Now, I know some people have heard of Berserker Rage Wolverine. There was no better depiction of this than during Jeff Lemire's Old Man Logan run with Andrea Sorrentino, right? Like, let myself become madness, death, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, it's just one of the coolest moments, one of the coolest depictions ever. But Berserker Rage Wolverine is when Wolverine just loses any sense of like sentience, right? Like just human intelligence and just devolves into an animalistic state. It's his most dangerous form. And in fact, whenever this happens around the X-Men, unless there's some kind of telepath there, these guys just run for their life. They will rarely ever decide to try to fight and calm down a berserker rage Wolverine, because he'll kill them all, right? So again, like, it's a very, very dangerous version of him. But instead of just like attacking the Predator, he basically starts clawing his way out of the ship, right? Again, kind of an animalistic state, not really thinking, because if he was, he would have been like, okay, so it's time for this Predator to die. He would have just killed this thing and then just called it a day. Then like jumped out of the ship, right? But whatever it is, he ends up jumping out and crash landing down on Earth, where he's recovered by Professor Thornton and the rest of Weapon X. Here's the kicker about all this, and it's one of the things that I love about this, right? We don't really know, at least I don't really know, the ins and outs of how the Predator helmets work. I'm sure it's been explored over the course of the Predator expanded universe, but for its intents and purposes here, Professor Thornton ends up reverse engineering the capabilities of the Wolverine helmet, and that's how they develop the helmet that's attached to Wolverine's head during Weapon X, the one they use to brainwash him. So like, it's a really cool bit of historical adjustment here by Benjamin Percy, because what we never really knew when it came to this story is if this story kind of took place in an alternate reality or something along those lines, right? Seemingly it takes place in the main Marvel universe. It's just a moment that we'd never really heard of before. But by tying in the creation of the brainwashing helmet to the Predator's helmet, now it establishes it as being in continuity, because it's just a main part of his character. At least that's kind of all I really have to go on. But the fact remains here, right? Wolverine just kind of puts together these little bits and pieces, right? Just kind of goes through and just kind of does a little bit of investigative work in the modern era. Because remember, the actual fights between Wolverine and Predator, those are taking place in the past. He's recollecting all these little things. And so as a brief kind of reprieve here, in the present day, he's walking around with the Predator's helmet, because likely he's trying to draw it back in, right? Trying to draw his attention for like one final confrontation. I feel like that's important to throw out there, because we're getting towards the end of that story. So that will likely be a significant moment as to why it is the Predator shows up again in the first place. But what ends up going on here is we jump back to the Muramasa estate in the past. Now, anybody who knows anything about Wolverine's mythos is probably just like, oh my God, yes, Muramasa. Yes, man, Muramasa's amazing. So Muramasa was considered the greatest swordsmith in the history of Marvel Comics. Nobody made better swords than this guy. But the other reason why Muramasa is so important is because, one, he trained Wolverine on how to fight, and two, he's the creator of the Muramasa blade. Basically, this blade that Wolverine possesses that was created by Muramasa, and a portion of Wolverine's soul was put into the sword. What that meant is that if the Muramasa blade even cuts Wolverine once, it shuts off his healing factor. And literally, he just becomes a regular guy. It nullifies his mutant ability. He would die due to any number of things, right? Adamantium poisoning, the weight of the adamantium crushing his body, whatever it happened to be, right? This guy could be killed in any number of ways. But as they're training, one of the cool things you kind of get here is the desire of Wolverine to use his claws. But as Muramasa says, no, you need to learn to fight in the art of the sword, because if you can learn to fight with both your sword and your claws, you could be indestructible. You could be this unbeatable guy that no one can stand against, which is an accurate statement. And in fact, that's one of the ways in which Wolverine has become so deadly over the years. And so what ends up happening is that as these guys are training and as these guys are talking, Muramasa picks up on the fact that something's coming. And then Wolverine realizes the same thing, only for the two of them to realize the Predator has arrived. That is basically adapted, and as far as it's concerned, it's now a full-on knockdown, drag-out fight. It's hunting its perfect trophy. And so now the whole situation has evolved, and you've got Wolverine and Muramasa facing off against the Predator, which we'll find out what happens in the next video. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Cliffhangers, and I will catch you all later. Peace.